Welcome, as I say again, to Richard Power-Sayeed. It's interesting to talk to some of our callers so far today, Khalid and Jim, lots of text messages as well, about where we are with Israel. It is absolutely fascinating, the reactions that people have, I find, to where, what Israel does. And you and I very much differ in terms of not who we support, but what actions we think are reasonable from Israel. And it does seem to me that Israel, in taking out the Hezbollah command, basically the entire command and control sort of empire there, taking out half of Hezbollah's missiles and rockets, we believe, in their attacks in southern Lebanon, and also that audacious attack with exploding pagers and walkie-talkies, taking out, they believe, some 1,500 Hezbollah militants, often from them very, very senior as well, huge number who've been blinded in an eye, lost a limb, had other wounds, which would get them out of being able to be useful as militants. I don't wish anyone, well, no, I do. No, I do. I do wish Hezbollah militants die, and I do. Sorry, I'm not even going to lie. But I don't want any innocent people to die. I don't want their kids to die or be injured. But the reality is Israel is at war, and Israel is doing, in my view, the correct defensive actions to keep themselves and their people safe. Why do people, including you, seem to think that what Israel is doing is always somehow wrong, when they always seem to justify everything that Hezbollah and Hamas do as well? That's retaliation for what Israel last did. But anything that Israel does is automatically wrong and a war crime.
I think that, well, I mean, I don't think anyone denies that what Hamas and Hezbollah are doing have been and are war crimes.
I think there are a lot of people who've done that.
A lot of people there, but what I mean is that, like, I don't think your callers were saying that. Yeah. That, I mean, I'm a Zionist, so obviously I'm not saying that. I mean, I think one of the really big mistakes is to forget the history of all of this. And if we look at, like, the last time that Hezbollah was decapitated in the early 80s, the consequence of that was not that Hezbollah became permanently weak and Israel was in a stronger position. It was exactly the same thing that always happens in this situation, which is that you create a new generation of terrorists who have seen innocent people slaughtered in order to kill this, like, one terrorist leader. And the popular support for Hezbollah, which I'm afraid to say does exist in Lebanon, but it's by no means all of the population, but there are people there who are helping them. That grows and grows and grows. And
do you think it wouldn't otherwise? So if Israel never did anything, if Israel never retaliated, then eventually all these people who supported Hezbollah and indeed Hamas would just go, you know what, quite like the Israelis, don't mind the Jews at all. They'd be absolutely fine with it. Because I think this argument, the idea that everything Israel does is recruiting sergeant for the Islamist radicals, they're going to be Islamist radicals either way. There is nothing that Israel can do that will stop them from doing that.
No, that's just not true. That we know that people, like, get radicalised by terrible conditions, whereas they're more likely.
Conditions are created by Hamas and Hezbollah.
They're more likely to sit there and be like, well, I'm a bit anti-Semitic, but I'm just going to, like, ignore the fact that Israel's over there. No, that's what you need, right? You're not going to totally eliminate hatred.
Israel has not created 500% inflation in Lebanon.
You're not going to totally eliminate hatred, but what you can do is make it less powerful and less interested in.
They should be showering money and trade on Lebanon and on Gaza, and if they'd done that, then there wouldn't be these radicals out to kill them.
How on earth do you think that conflicts like this get dialed down and ultimately ended? It's not through escalating the war in the way that Netanyahu's doing.
This is the biggest fallacy in the West. This idea all wars end with people at the peace talks. No, actually, most wars end because one side has won. One side has defeated the military forces on the other side.
That's objectively untrue.
That is objectively true. Tell me how the last few world wars have ended.
The whole point is that the world wars were the massive exceptions.
Kaiser, they just went, let's just have a little chat.
The whole point is that the world wars are the ones we always focus on, We're not talking about a world war here. We're not even talking a regional war at the moment. The vast majority of wars end with negotiation. You call it a peace table. It's not a peace table, right? It's a bunch of people who despise each other, who've been forced into sitting down because they've realised that it's in their political interests to do so. At some point, if Israel's going to have a safe future, we've got to get to a situation
but
where
that's why Israel was signing accords and establishing diplomatic relations with Arab state after Arab state after Arab state.
And then
Netanyahu outrageously, apparently, retaliated against a terrorist group on its border that had massacred 1,200 Israelis.
I defended Israel's rights to defend itself.
But how far? How far are they allowed to defend itself?
In a way which doesn't undermine its future interests.
And how would that? And what would that be?
It's not.
I'm constantly told it's not what you're doing. So what is the appropriate retaliation for what happened on October the 7th?
Something that's not escalation.
What doesn't escalate?
I mean, keeping the violence at the level it's at is
keeping the violence at the level it's at. What would be? No, you can't just say things it's not.
No, I can't.
So not a nuclear weapon. Okay, fair enough. Not this. So what would be the appropriate response to being invaded by murderous, sadistic, rapist terrorists?
I'm happy to answer.
Because my response is, bomb the hell out of them.
So I'm happy to answer that, but there's two different things here, which is like, what's the appropriate response to Hezbollah, and there's what's the appropriate response to Hamas. Which one do you want me to answer?
Both of them.
Okay.
Quick. Come on.
Correct response to Hamas would have been to focus on getting the hostages back. But the point is,
how do they do that? How do they get the hostages back?
I mean, not by bombing loads of civilians in Gaza. And with
that's how
Hezbollah,
they got those hostages back. They've already got back.
And with, I mean, the hostage families are very, very clear that what Netanyahu is doing is going to result in the hostages that are still there dying, and just as so many of them already
If you seriously
have.
think Hamas is going to hand back the hostages because Israel isn't taking action, I mean, you're mad. I mean, you're genuinely mad. That's just not how it works. By the way, we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Oh,
remember
please.
that?
Everybody negotiates with terrorists eventually. This is unfortunate.
Eventually.
This is the truth of geopolitics.
You know what you do when you negotiate with terrorists? You encourage them to do things that get to terrorise again.
How do you think that the Northern Irish peace process happened? It's because John Major had the guts to go do secret negotiations with the IRA.
Yeah,
that's
but there
ultimately
wasn't a
how
deal.
you end the war.
That was the political journalist in 1998 watching that. There wasn't a deal until the IRA agreed to lay down their arms and give up cash and weapons.
You've got to negotiate
Hamas ain't offering to do that. Hamas's raison d'etre, Hezbollah's raison d'etre is the destruction of the Israeli state and the murder of all Jews. Oh yeah, and all infidels. That's you and me too, mate.
You're living in an overly simplified world.
No,
the geopolitics is complex, mate.
World.
Yeah, and they're the bad guys. You're just wrong about it.
Isn't that complicated? Power and military might is what succeeds against people who would try to militarily destroy you.
Israel is looking 20 years in the should be looking 20 years in the future.
Yeah, and not having Hamas and Hezbollah able to attack.
If they're looking at 20 years in the future, the US is not going to be able to protect them anymore. They need to get into a because the US is not going to be that strong in 20, 30 years. They're looking down the barrel of that gun, and they know they have got to solidify their trade relationships and their political relationships with the Arab dictatorships that surround them.
Which they were trying to do before Hamas.
And then they've torpedoed their own plan because of Netanyahu's personal ambitions to stop him being, trying for corruption.
I agree there's criticism of Netanyahu. However, I would be supporting everything that he's done so far, on this particular... Anyway, love to hear your thoughts.